Joe Mixon might be the fantasy MVP of the season, but he is ruining CJ Stroud in the process. We discuss the latest news around the NFL and start our Week 12 prep with waiver wire rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We are here Monday through Friday, every day, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can enjoy the season with a big return on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We had a somewhat fun Monday night game. I mean, it kind of went how we expected, but the Cowboys stuck around for a little bit longer than we thought. Cooper Rush put up some yards. He made CeeDee Lamb somewhat okay for fantasy, but Joe Mixon's the real story here, right? Over 150 yards. He scores 3 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he's the running back one now in points per game on average. So huge steal in fantasy drafts, but destroying CJ Stroud in the process where it's like he hasn't even been usable.
Yeah, what's crazy is all these running backs, we weren't sure about what they were going to do on their new teams. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley. Well, we kind of knew what Henry's going to do, but Barkley and Mixon and even Josh Jacobs, right? Michelle, we didn't know exactly what we were going to get. And they all got better. And you know why? Because they're all on better teams. And that helps. I mean, the Bengals were a good team, obviously, for a while, but last year they were not particularly good. The Texans, we knew that was the thing that was missing from their offense, just some guy who could take over and play at that level. So I just look at Mixon. He's just seeming to run with a passion and rejuvenation. And that's what I like about these backs, right? They also run with a bit of a chip on their shoulder that they feel disrespected. The original teams didn't want to keep them. And you can see that the way Mixon's running. He's strutting into the end zone. He's just rejuvenated, really. I mean, this is the best I think he's ever looked.
Yeah.
And and so, again, the top 3 running backs right now in fantasy, Henry, Barkley, Mixon, all on new teams. So we're going to watch this a little bit more carefully. It's a lesson to go forward with. If these running backs that were on bad teams or mediocre teams switch to great teams and they're still in the prime of their careers, go after them, draft them high, because they are definitely going to run with a little extra motivation and juice, and we're seeing that.
Yeah, and then with the Stroud side, though, because of Mixon, getting 3 rushing touchdowns, it's another bad game for him. 0 touchdowns and interception. He gets the Titans next week, which you can beat up on, but also it's a divisional game. I don't think you can trust Stroud. I mean, it's been too many weeks now where he's just been killing you. He's going to end up having a good game here and there, just like Patrick Mahomes. But I keep saying Patrick Mahomes should just be a streamer. So should Stroud. He should just be there if there's a really great matchup. But like last night was a really great matchup and he still didn't come through. So that is very disappointing if you drafted CJ Stroud high this year. Now, going to the other side of that game, CeeDee Lamb, like he came through with a good game, right? For what we expected.
Yeah.
8 receptions, 93 yards. Now, we had him ranked around wide receiver 14 going to this week. And that's kind of the production that we were hoping for when we ranked him there. We have to be happy with that. Yeah, no touchdown. But with Cooper Rush throwing the ball, Rush threw the ball 55 times last night. 354 yards, a touchdown, and interception. But no, I'm not picking up Cooper Rush in fantasy. But I mean, if he's going to keep throwing this often because they don't have a run game, then that's good for CeeDee Lamb. Do you have any hope for him next week against the Commanders, who have been much better on defense as of late?
Yeah, he'll avoid the Marshawn Lattimore tough matchup. He'll be inside. Probably see a lot of Mike Sinriskel, the rookie from Michigan, right? So that's going to help in that matchup for sure, that he's facing a rookie a lot and a lot of garbage time. So the 2 things we can count on right now, Cooper Rush volume and Cowboys garbage time. Those are the 2 things that could save CeeDee Lamb here, as they don't care, right? Because he's a guy that runs the middle of the field. They're going to let those routes just happen, and he's just going to compile games like this one where it's like 10 to 12 catches, but probably not per reception a lot, right? So you need to get by on volume. I don't know if he's going to get the touchdowns. Unfortunately, this team is not a good scoring team at this point. So you need to get by on volume. And with CJ Stroud, Michelle, I think he's also not playing well. That interception was a weird read. I think teams have caught up to him a little bit with what he can do. And he's a little bit too dependent on the deep ball. Like he's looking for the deep ball. If he doesn't get it, then it gets smashed because his yards per attempt were pretty good in that game. It's just that he's not really good at maybe checking down or throwing the ball away when he needs to. I think he's always looking for the home run. So maybe he can change that. The Titans were beatable. We saw Sam Darnold have a good game. So there's a little bit of hope this week. And we need it because you might need to play him during a bye.
Yeah, and like you mentioned with CJ Stroud, Nico Collins ended up having a disappointing game too for what we wanted. But like the first play of the game, it wasn't Nico Collins, 80-yard touchdown that got called back. So that would have been huge for CJ Stroud. That would have been huge for Nico Collins. Collins is still, you have plenty of hope. As soon as that play happened, you knew you weren't getting anything out of Collins. He just sprinted 80 yards to start the game, and he hasn't been playing for the last 4 games. He was going to be beat after that. That was the worst part about that play being called back. You just knew what was going to happen the rest of the game. So that was unfortunate. We got some other news that was kind of confusing. Daniel Jones being benched. That's not so much the confusing part, but he's getting benched for Tommy DeVito, not for Drew Lock. I don't really know if it would have mattered either way who was starting, but what does this mean for Malik Nabers? He gets an amazing matchup against the Buccaneers. I will say, like, we saw DeVito start a handful of games last year. Darius Slayton had a couple of good games in there with him, one including 82 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Hyatt had a 109-yard game with Tommy DeVito as the starter last year. So, like, there's some hope, and none of those guys I just named are nearly as talented as Malik Nabers. So you're still going with Nabers, and I'm still going to trust him, even though it's Tommy DeVito back there.
Yeah, you actually might unlock more players with Tommy DeVito versus Drew Lock, because Drew Lock, and the one thing he does is throw downfield. He has a big arm, where Tommy DeVito is probably going to spread it around a little bit more. That means players such as Wan'Dale Robinson and Theo Johnson will be involved a little bit more. He's not necessarily a runner the way that Daniel Jones is, so some of those shorter passes are going to be executed versus him taking off. And then I think this is also good news for Tyrone Tracy Jr. This is a great matchup against the Buccaneers, so I think they'll unleash their rookies, so to speak, their trio of really good guys here between Nabers, Tracy, and Johnson. I think these guys are all going to benefit from this change. And again, if it was Lock, you probably would have got a lot of inconsistency, maybe some chances for big play games from Malik Nabers. But here, I think what you'll get by with is pretty good volume, and it doesn't come at a better time. And DeVito at least will distribute well, I think, against the Buccaneers.
Yeah, here's to hoping that it's better than Daniel Jones. It
it
can't
has
really
to be.
get worse. It can't get. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but it can't get worse. It could be the same, which I kind of expect. Now we're waiting to hear if Mike Evans will be back. That would be huge for both Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. They have an amazing schedule: Giants, Panthers, Raiders. The Chargers' only hard game left on their schedule, because then the Cowboys, the Panthers, and the Saints. So yeah, hopefully Evans is back. Maybe they think they can beat the Giants and Tommy DeVito without him. They give him another week, but keep an eye on that. Another thing to keep an eye on is that Jonathan Brooks should maybe finally play. Miles Sanders is going to be out. Chuba Hubbard is still clearly the lead back. I will say Jonathan Brooks doesn't scare me about Hubbard at all. It's this schedule. Yeah. I mean, the Chiefs, I don't want to play a running back against. Then the Buccaneers are really hard to run against, but you can throw against, but probably not the Panthers can throw against. And then the Eagles. So 3 really, really hard run defenses. So that's what scares me about Hubbard, not Jonathan Brooks. I don't think Brooks is playable unless something were to happen to Hubbard.
Yeah, the timing is weird. Sanders is out. They bring back Brooks. It's a really impossible team to run on. I know James Cook had a good game last week, but it's because he scored twice. Otherwise, he would not have had a good game at all. So he was fortunate to get those 2 scores. That's what you're going to count on if you play Hubbard this week, and hopefully they don't suddenly introduce a Jonathan Brooks goal line usage to get his feet wet. I hope that's not the case here. That would not be good for Hubbard in this game. And you can hope for some passes caught as well. Brooks can do that, so we'll see what the usage is. But yeah, this is not the best time, given it's the worst matchup you could have for running backs.
Now, one last piece of news here. Gabe Davis is going on IR. That doesn't matter for him for fantasy. You weren't playing him. But now Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis are on IR. Brian Thomas Jr. is the last guy standing there in this wide receiver room. Mac Jones only threw for 138 yards this last weekend, and Brian Thomas got 82 of those yards on 5 receptions. So, I do think going forward, he's a good play. They do have a bye this week. Maybe Trevor Lawrence comes back after the bye. That would be great. Or even if it's Mac Jones, they get the Texans, the Titans, the Jets, the Raiders, the Titans. Like Brian Thomas Jr. gets a bump up from this injury.
Yeah, he could finish in the top 12, Michelle. This is how good this injury could be, because I was watching a little bit of Brian Thomas's game back, and he's now running the routes that were inside for Christian Kirk as well. So they're using him in the slot. They're using him outside. He's proved to be a lot more than a field stretcher, deep threat, kind of scoring type receiver. He can be technically sound with his hands and route running and possession guy. That's great, because if you have Mac Jones continuing to start, it's a short area guy that can make some plays after the catch. If it's Lawrence, he can stretch the field. So this is all lining up very nicely. If you have Brian Thomas Jr., you should be very happy. If you don't have him, it's a bye week. Maybe you try to swap something for him if your trade deadline is not passed in your league.
Yeah, we have to transition now into getting ready for week 12. And we always start with our waiver wire rankings, right? We got to get you prepped to put those in tonight on your apps. And then we'll get into our positional rankings on tomorrow and Thursday's show. So we'll start our waiver wire rankings and our streamers of the week right after a quick break. Do you deal with nasty hangovers? Maybe drink a little too many glasses of wine, too many mimosas, too many espresso martinis like I do? Well, I have the solution for you. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. This is how it works when you get a hangover. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your next rough day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down so you feel better the next morning. So all you have to do is just remember to take ZBiotics before your first drink of the night. Then, of course, drink responsibly. Don't get crazy. Pace yourself. Drink some water throughout the night. And then you get to wake up feeling refreshed the next morning and ready to take on the day. So go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and it's that way for a reason, because the action is so easy to get in on for the NFL, and it's getting hot, and well, it's getting colder outside, but the action is getting hotter. The playoff picture is here. The race for the #1 seed to get into the playoffs, all that is there, and it's week 12, and soon we'll have Thanksgiving and a feast there for you in the middle of the week coming up next week. Just get in on that action, again, only on FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you have placed your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started again with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's all you need to do. That's only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show. We will transition here from some news and notes to our waiver wire first look here, and we'll look at the priorities here. And look, the place where we always need the most help, wide receiver and running back. So we're going to stick with that. There's not a lot out there, but let's talk about some guys that could be very helpful for a team this week, especially with the 6 bye weeks.
Yeah, I think the #1 guy on your list, it has to be Quentin Johnston, right? Like, I know it's coming in a hard way where you can trust it, but 3 straight weeks with a touchdown. He did have 8 targets last week. Now, that only led to 2 receptions, but he's been on the field way more than he's ever been. These last 2 weeks, he's playing at least 82% of the snaps. He gets I I know the Ravens played tough against the Steelers, but I don't think they fixed their defense in a span of 1 week. So I still think they're going to be able to be thrown on by other teams. And then Quentin Johnson gets to face the Falcons, who just had a meltdown against the Broncos this past weekend, and they have injuries. And then the Chiefs, a little bit tougher, but they're going to have to score to keep up with them. And then the Buccaneers. So the schedule is great, and he's getting used, and he's getting those big plays and touchdowns. So Quentin Johnson would be my number one guy in waivers.
Yeah, I think everyone's a little bit skeptical to pick him up because his ownership is right around 50. It's dropped below 50 in a lot of weeks. So I think everyone's, is he a big play guy? Can I look at a guy that doesn't get a lot of targets and him so touchdown dependent? But after a while, if the guy scores every week and they're throwing it to him in situations, not only in the red zone, but for those deep shot scores, which remember his first 2 scores early in the year came in short passes that Justin Herbert looks to him when they need a touchdown. I don't think that's an accident. And when I look at Quentin Johnson, look, Ladd McConkey's come on too, but what's happened is Justin Herbert is just throwing the ball better. He's throwing the ball more. So that means his top 3 targets right now, Quentin Johnson, Ladd McConkey, and Will Dissly, believe it or not. These are 3 guys that are getting the job done, and all these guys have very good matchups against the Ravens this week. So this is a really good opportunity for Herbert to keep it going because they're going to have to throw a lot with Lamar Jackson on the other side.
Yeah, they really are. And they should have to throw a lot in all these matchups I brought up. So
Yeah.
I like Quentin Johnson. He's not going to be safe, but I mean, if there's anyone safe out there right now on waivers, they wouldn't be on waivers, right? They would have been picked up a while ago. Jerry Jeudy's one we have to bring up, 11 targets in each of the last 2 games. He's probably rostered in a lot of leagues, but if he's out there, I get it. He has a hard schedule, but you can't really let someone that's sitting out there, get 11 targets a game. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable playing him against the Steelers this week. And then he gets the Broncos and the Steelers, but he gets the Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins after that. I don't know. I think he's playable with a lower ceiling against these tough matchups.
Yeah, I get he's getting the volume, but it seems like it's a different person each week. And the funny thing is, Jerry Jeudy, he's like the anti-Quentin Johnson. Like, you look up and say, wait, this many people have him on their roster? It's because his name is Jerry Jeudy, and he's a familiar name, and that's why he's on the roster. But I get he's getting the volume, and hopefully Jameis Winston will keep tossing a ton here. Their running game stinks. Their defense stinks. So this should mean they throw a lot to not only Jeudy, but Cedric Tillman. If you're in a deeper league, Elijah Moore is out there. But it's really hard to go there this week against the Steelers with Joey Porter Jr., the pass rush, all the good stuff that the Steelers have on a short week. So, again, you can play any of these Browns receivers if you're in a pinch this week. Everyone has a chance to do something. If anyone would, I think it's Jeudy. He's got a little bit better matchup on the inside. Another guy that I really like, and he shouldn't be out there. This is, again, because no one knows how to say his name. And nobody knows that he's even maybe playing for the Titans. But I think everyone noticed when he caught a 98-yard touchdown pass last week from Will Levis. Well, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. And if you look at 3 of the last 4 games, he's come through, and it's tied to no DeAndre Hopkins. There's just a chemistry between him and Levis that hasn't been consistently there with Calvin Ridley. And you look at the matchup this week, it is very good. They struggle with speed receivers and quick receivers, the Texans do. They had problems with Kevontae Turpin last week and CeeDee Lamb. So this is a sneaky play. He's out there in like gazillion leagues. And if you just need someone for this week and you want to plug in and you might have some bench value, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, the matchup lines up and his recent production does as well.
Yeah, he's been on the field a ton since DeAndre Hopkins left. Has a touchdown in 5 of the last 6 games. Like, he's been a touchdown machine. It's not only a great matchup this week against the Texans. After that, he gets the Commanders, Jaguars, Bengals, Colts, Jaguars. Like, not a game in there you're worried about. Yeah, so like he's definitely a great pickup. Again, gonna be risky to start him in any given week. You need that long touchdown, but that's going to be a lot of these guys. Unfortunately, another guy just like this, who we'd be having on this list as an immediate pickup, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, he has a bye this week, but if you don't need a player for this week and you're just looking for someone to add for, the long haul here, after the break, he gets the Rams, Giants, Commanders, Packers, Raiders. Those are all winnable defenses. And again, it's not on volume, but he has 109 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then 87 yards and a touchdown in this Saints offense where they like to use that deep threat. And Derek Carr knows the hit. Like, he's a good deep passer. He's not good at many things, but he's a good deep passer. MVS, if you don't need someone for this week, would also be at the top of my list to pick up.
Yeah, they're signing guys off the street at this point to fill out wide receiver, and MVS is the most known name of all these guys, and he's the most known producer, and he has a specific role to be the big play threat. Now, I think he can get a little bit more done than just be a big play threat. That's the trouble, right? Is he going to be used in different ways? But he's getting too much attention from Derek Carr not to be rostered again. If you're not in a pinch this week, you have that luxury, go for it. Now, Xavier Legette, what I'm going to say about the Panthers, I know the matchup isn't spectacular against the Chiefs, but you can clearly see they want to turn the page for the youth movement, right? With Bryce Young, they want to see what Jonathan Brooks can do. They're seeing what Jatavion Sanders can do. I think they'll see more what Xavier Legette can do. And it actually might help if Adam Thielen potentially could return because it's a veteran, but at least draw some coverage attention. Now, I'm not going to say the Chiefs have to go double team him or anything, but keep in mind the Chiefs are good in the slot there with Thielen, so that could really help Legette. So I'm not saying he's a great play for this week, but I think he's a good stash for this stretch run. And then two more guys that you might be able to play this week, Wan'Dale Robinson and Christian Watson.
Yeah, those three you just named are desperation plays.
But there are some this week.
And if I'm going for a desperation play there, it'd be Christian Watson if I
Yeah.
had to choose between those three. Look, I just don't trust the Panthers whatsoever, especially not against the Chiefs defense. And Wando, like I'm gonna trust Nabers with Tommy DeVito. Don't ask me to trust two Giants wide receivers with
That's fair.
So, but moving on to the running backs, again, it's not easy to find a running back on waivers. This year might be the hardest one with running back waivers. It's been really gross since the start of the season, but Amir Abdullah looks to be like he could maybe be taking a lead role in this Raiders offense. We have injuries to both Alexander Madison and Zamir White. Abdullah last week, he got into the end zone when those two went down. It was as a receiver, only had one carry for 1 yard, but Abdullah might get the opportunity against the Broncos. Any desire for him? That's basically like if you just need a body in your running back spot.
Yeah, you might have to plug him in there, and I hate to say it, but there's some really thin running back rosters this week. A lot of key players are off. So, yeah, I think if he's the starter, you got to plug him. They haven't really activated the rookie Dylan Lobb behind him, so he would be playing his first real action behind him. So they'd have to give Amir Abdullah some volume. It doesn't matter if they trail against Broncos because he's a good pass catcher as well. So I think if anyone's going to score against the Broncos, it's a good chance Amir Abdullah does. Now, another way you could look at this week that is similar is Cam Akers. And I want to credit the agents of Amir Abdullah and Cam Akers because they keep getting jobs somehow. Amir Abdullah, I thought had retired 4 years ago or something. Like he was all that hype with the Lions. That seems like forever ago. And Cam Akers, all that hype with the Rams also seems forever ago. But he scored last week, seeing a little more touches with Aaron Jones. The Bears do give up some yards. So if you're a little desperate and you just want to put someone in the flex, you could look at Akers. And another option might be Trey Benson. We've talked about him a lot as a handcuff that you have to have for James Conner, but the Seahawks run defense stinks. So you might get some residual performance from him. So got to stretch it here during this bye. It's a quote by Mageddon. So sometimes you have to do it.
I think Trey Benson would honestly maybe be my favorite out of these three.
Yeah.
Because also if anything happens to James Conner, then Trey Benson would become a league winner.
Yeah.
He also got 10 carries in their last game before their bye week to Connor's 12, was getting some targets. And also now they just had a bye week. So maybe they come out of it and say, let's keep Conner healthy. Let's really do 50-50 split here. So I would like to go Benson in this matchup just for any hope of any points. I don't think Cam Akers is going to be too I don't know. It's going to be up and down with him. We shall see. We're going to move on to our streamers of the week at quarterback, tight end, and defenses right after we take one last break. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties that you can choose to, use your points on. Also, you can use your points to book fitness studio classes. You can redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guys and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now. When you go in, all you have to do is join built.com/LockedOnNFL. That's join BILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our URL so that they know we sent you. That's again, joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. I think there's a clear-cut streaming quarterback if he's still out there for this week, and it's Bo Nix against the Raiders. But he is rostered in about 50% of leagues, and last week he had a really nice matchup, so maybe he's gone. But against the Raiders, I know it's an away game, and I know he scores way more fantasy points at home. And really, he only has 3 passing touchdowns with 3 interceptions in 6 road games. But the Raiders aren't a road game to me, and the Raiders defense stinks. So Bo Nix would be definitely my number 1 streamer quarterback of the week.
Yeah, and I bet his roster percentage will go up beyond 50%. So this is probably the last chance if you want to get him. I think he has value beyond this week. There's some nice matchups coming up. I think they're playing the Browns next, who've kind of fallen apart in pass defense as well. So there's just some, and the Bengals, I think, are also on the schedule in a few weeks. So there are some really good games for this Broncos team as a whole, and then this player, Bo Nix, to keep playing well. So I do like it. He's a top 10 play this week, and he's actually the average QB 13 now after his big performance last week. So he's right in the range of QB 1. Dare I say, he's also maybe threatening Jaden Daniels a little bit for offensive rookie of the year. So let's watch it, because the Broncos might be a surer playoff thing at this point than the Commanders. So let's watch that play out. But his play, again, he's been very impressive all season long, and I think it definitely continues when the Raiders stink. So.
Yeah, I can't imagine he won't have a good game against them. Now, who would you rather go with? Anthony Richardson, who had a nice game in his first game back, coming off the bench. He gets the Lions, though. They've been a tough defense. They're allowing the 6th fewest points per game to quarterbacks. They're good against the run as well, but that's what Richardson needs to succeed. Or Tua Tagovailoa against the Patriots. Tua had a solid game this past week. We saw Matthew Stafford just put up 4 touchdowns against the Patriots. Which one would you rather go with this week off waivers?
Yeah, I would go for the younger quarterback who's playing at home. I know it seems like the matchup is harder versus Detroit, but I look at Anthony Richardson. He played with a lot more confidence last week. He was taking off and running, making some plays there. There's going to be some of the middle field open like it hasn't been with Alex Anzalone out. So you could have some of those shorter passes work, but he's not a short pass guy necessarily. You can burn the Lions downfield. So he's going to be aggressive, which I like, with the running and the passing. And the Lions should give him some good garbage time in this game as well, where, look, the Patriots-Dolphins game actually might be a little tough in a weird way. I do like Drake May as well. If you need someone here with that massive bye with all those quarterbacks off and you were playing a streaming game or doing some platoons with those guys that were on a bye. So I do like Drake May as well. But I would say if you had to pick one, Richardson, just the cheat code is still in play for him a little bit more than May.
Yeah, I would definitely prefer Richardson to May. I don't like May at all this week. The Dolphins defense is only getting better, allowed the 3rd fewest points per game already this year to quarterbacks. I'm kind of staying away from the May play here in a divisional game. But also in that Anthony Richardson game, we have a quarterback across the way, Jared Goff, who went off last week against the Jaguars. Now, he probably was dropped before that, right? Because he was playing terribly for fantasy. Then he goes off against the Jaguars. So he might be out there. Now they go on the road again, but it's against the Colts. The Colts have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game at home to quarterbacks this year. So Jared Goff or Anthony Richardson?
Oh, it's definitely Goff, because if you look at the flow chart for Goff, I mean, the question is, will the Lions be able to run the ball however they want? If the answer is yes, play Jared Goff. because when they run the ball well, Jared Goff does well. When the running game is contained, Jared Goff does not do well. So it's because they have so much with Ben Johnson, not only with the play action, but the kind of the run fake type things, right? With his little head shakes and the things he does to try to sell people on the run. That's where a lot of the success comes in. The Colts are also not good at covering the tight end where he likes to throw. They're actually okay in the slot, but Amon-Ra St. Brown is on fire, and it could be another big game for Jameson Williams. So, again, all the things that usually make Jared Goff successful will be playing this game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Moving on to tight ends, there's one clear one if he's still out there, which he is in too many leagues. Hunter Henry,
Yeah.
he's been consistent. He's getting the targets. Doesn't have the highest ceiling, but he's the guy that I'm going with if he's out there. But if he's already taken in your league, who would you like out of these four options? You got Will Disley going up against the Ravens after his big week last week. Jonnu Smith against the Patriots, revenge game after his big week last week. Zach Ertz against the Cowboys, or Isaiah Likely against the Chargers. Who would you go with out of this group?
Yeah, when you look at Disley, like he's actually come on strong the last few weeks, and they kind of figured out who they want to go to in this offense. It is a Greg Roman offense, so we figured at some point they would know how to use the tight end. And Disley has been battling injuries, but he's been a productive guy before. We've seen it in Seattle. If he gets the opportunity, he can be productive. He's just battled a lot of injuries. And the Ravens give up a lot to the tight end. And those underneath balls, that is a problem that they have. You look at the Tanner Hudson game and things like that, right? Pat Freiermuth did okay. Not great, but he was still involved more in relation to what Pat Freiermuth does, right? So Will Disley has been great. I mean, he's making plays downfield. He's really involved. So I do like Will Disley quite a bit. And then I would think I would go Jonnu Smith. And then Isaiah Likely is just so hard to trust from week to week.
Yeah.
So you can go get him, but it's crazy. He was like snatched up after week one, and now he's 74% available. That should tell you a little bit of something with his production and his injury. And then Zach Ertz, if you're desperate, you can go there against the Cowboys. I don't know how much they'll need to throw on Dallas, but at least Ertz might have some kind of NFC East revenge on his mind in that game, and maybe they'll feed him the ball. But again, I do love Will Disley this week. I mean, I'll say that because I also had to watch Will Disley beat me in a matchup this week. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is the guy that's beating me. But I looked at the film and I said, okay, yeah, he had a great game. He was open all the time.
Yeah, I would say I agree with the Disley first, Jonnu second. I would then put Zach Ertz third and then Likely last.
Yeah.
But I don't really want to go with Ertz or Likely. So
Yeah.
Will Disley or Jonnu Smith. Of course, Hunter Henry, though, first because he's the safest. Lastly, streaming defenses. If the Commanders are out there and they get the Cowboys, yes, please. Another one, though, that's sneaky. Buccaneers against the Giants. I know the Buccaneers defense has been stinking, but they get Tommy DeVito. So they would actually kind of be enticing to me. And then the Cardinals defense has been playing lights out of nowhere. Now it's a hard offense against the Seahawks, but Geno Smith has been enjoying throwing interceptions lately too. So I think those are my three top defenses for the week.
Yeah, and I'll add the Rams only because it always seems like the Rams are not doing anything. But I know they're playing the Eagles this week, but I think they're actually playing well. I mean, they're getting sacks. You're seeing the two rookies, Braden Fisk and looking Jared Verse as well, both from Florida State, doing well in that defense and starting to make some plays there. So, and we know the Eagles sometimes can have that odd turnover game. And then the Rams could cause some of that on Sunday night. And also, like any defense playing at home in prime time, they tend to play better if they're a decent defense. And the Rams are that. I mean, I'm not going to say go play the Browns against the Steelers, right? That's not how it works. But if you're a decent defense, you're going to play a little bit harder and a little bit better when the lights are on. So the Rams, again, have actually been a very consistent top 12 type defense. And the Cardinals, they've been way available, too much for how they play the last 2 weeks. I don't care if they're on the road this week. It's a good team. They still force things, and I think they'll get better after the bye.
Yeah, and if Houston's still out there as well, I know they played the Cowboys, so they could have been picked up, but they get the Titans and then the Jaguars, and we saw them, get that defensive touchdown last night against the Cowboys. Titans are giving up so many points to fantasy defenses, and so are the Jags. So, pick up the Texans. That would be actually my number one pickup if they're out there, just because you can play them the next 2 weeks. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, can you please give us a like and subscribe on YouTube, and then give us a like on your podcast app? We thank you so much. That just, helps us be here every day, Monday through Friday, to help you win your fantasy leagues. We'll be back tomorrow starting our positional rankings. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.